Daniel Crouch. Well, many of you will be familiar with Daniel through his career as an antiquarian bookseller, map seller, but equally you will probably have come across his enthusiasm for maps and his deep interest in the rare, and that's what you're going to see now, something rare and, in my mind, very exciting. Over to you, Daniel.
Hi, good evening. We have the first slide. There we go. I'm often asked what it is that we sell, and my shorthand answer has always been answers to the questions either where are we or what time is it? Intriguingly, maps and star charts tend to answer these separately, although I've noticed of late that Aztec charts tend to answer the two questions simultaneously by showing a genealogy alongside a geography. What fascinates me is that maps didn't actually answer the question, where are we going, until comparatively late in cartography. And it wasn't really until the 1100 BC that you start to see road maps appearing in any form whatsoever. I'm reminded of a comment made to me 10 years ago by the former curator of the maps of the British Library, Tony Campbell, which is that medieval maps come on the market or are discovered about the rate of roughly one every 10 years. And he made that comment to me when we found one 10 years ago. And so in light of that, I was very pleased recently to find a map, a medieval map that had previously been undocumented, although it was actually hiding in plain sight. And if we have the next slide, it's on the Chaworth Roll. And the Chaworth Roll is a 14th century genealogy of the kings of England. And it has been written up and researched in great detail, in particular by an essay by Professor Alex Bovey at the Courtauld. And it's mostly been considered as a work of early English vernacular art. And it is indeed rather beautiful, as you can see. However, as I discovered when I was researching it, it also happens to include second earliest road map of Great Britain. Now, when I started researching it, I thought it was the first earliest road map of Great Britain, but more on that in a moment. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, road maps are relatively late in the history of cartography. This is the earliest recorded, it's the Turin Papyrus map from 1160, and that shows routes around a wadi in Thebes in ancient Egypt. Following on from that, next slide, please. There is the very famous portion of a bit of a shield, which is the Dura Europus map. And this is a Roman soldier's map showing towns along the Black Sea. And it's the earliest map of Europe preserved in any form. And I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the next one, which is the Tabula Peuteringer. Now, what's particularly interesting about this is its warped perspective, and it shows the extent of the Roman road network in the whole of Europe. What's particularly interesting about this, for my purposes, is the only extant copies, as you can see at the top left there, are missing the British Isles. Which means, and as a resident of the grand city of Oxford, I say this with enormous personal pride, that for most of my adult life, the earliest road map of the British Isles has always been assumed to be, next slide please, the very famous Gough map, which is about 1 mile from where I'm sitting now. And that was done in about 1360 and looks, you know, vaguely familiar from the point of view of the British Isles. However, very recently, this landed on my desk. Next slide, please. It's a roll. It's a roll comprising 9 pieces of parchment joined, and it extends to an astonishing 21 feet or 6.5 meters in length. And next slide, please. That's definitely not mine.
Hold on.
And if you want to make that slightly larger, you can press play. And it's rather, just to prove that this is not just a video, I have here the scroll in front of me.
Oh my gosh.
And it starts with these 3 roundels that you can see there. And they are pictorial prefaces to the rest of the Chaworth Roll, which is a genealogical roll, as I mentioned, of the kings of England, extending from Egbert in about between 829 and 839, he didn't have the longest reign, to Edward II in 1307 to 1327, and it's got a little canny stuck-on extension through to Henry IV rather. And so therefore the roll could be dated for some time between 1321 and 1327 with an extension to 1413. Its text is in Anglo-Norman, and it's one of 4 such similar scrolls, 2 in Cambridge, 1 in the Bodleian, and this one. However, only 1 in Cambridge and this one bear these rather magnificent 4 pictorial prefaces. I'm going to let this roll for a little bit so you can get some sense of what it looks like as it unrolls, because it's a really beautiful thing. And it was made for, it would appear, the children of Thomas Chaworth, vaguely related to the royal line through Maud Chaworth, who married Henry Plantagenet, which is very interesting because he's one of the last figures to appear on the first part of the roll. And Thomas Chaworth had 4 children, John, Joanna, Alice, and Thomas. And funnily enough, these would appear to correspond to the 4 rolls. As I say, 2 in Cambridge, 1 in the Bodleian, and 1 in my bedroom. And what's fascinating is the pictorial prefaces, these 3 roundels at the beginning. If we have the next slide.
Hold on.
Are, when you look at them closely, in themselves, geographic. So the first one on the left there is the one we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. The second one is a depiction of the Wheel of Fortune, and it basically gives the role of chance in the life and ruling of a monarch. And the third one is a map of the Saxon Heptarchy. I'm going to start with that one. And it doesn't look like a map, it's heavily stylized. But if you look at the top, it's orientated with Orient, east to the top. And each of these 7 roundels around it represents, in geographic order, the 7 ancient kingdoms of England that were unified under Egbert. It's often said that Alfred the Great founded, it was the first king of England, but that's just because he had a better name than Egbert, I think. It was really Egbert who unified the 7 kingdoms. And if you take the next slide, you'll see these 7 kingdoms are Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Sussex, and Wessex. So at the top of the map there is Kent, with Mercia and Wessex at the bottom. Next slide, please. And I've translated these roundels, and so you can see that around the outside, you can see the cardinal points of the compass, then the names of the kingdoms, and then in each of the internal roundels is a description of the kingdom. So with Kent, Canterbury, and Rochester are named, Essex, London, and Hertford, and in Northumbria, in East Anglia, you've got Norwich and Cambridge, Northumbria, Durham, and Carlisle. And then in Mercia, Coventry, and Lichfield, and somewhat curiously, in Wessex, my own kingdom, Bicester, a village which is mostly known for shopping village these days, gets a mention alongside Salisbury. Next slide, please. Now, the map that's of particular interest here is the map of the 4 Roman roads. And the Roman roads are, working from right to left of the names on the spindles, are Watling Street, the Icknield Way, the Fosse Way, and Ermine Street. Now, these 4 roads were described in the research that was done on this map by Dr. Alex Bovey as 4 Roman roads. Now, they are indeed all Roman roads, but what ties them to this map and makes it so intriguing is that they are, in fact, what separates those from the other 30 or 40 Roman roads that were used for moving Roman troops, is that these went on to become the 4 royal roads. Next slide, please. And the 4 royal roads marked here, and we did a little tube diagram, this is done by my excellent graphic designer, to show you the routes of them. The 4 royal roads were particularly important in uniting the 7 kingdoms, because the king's laws were, and the right of the rule of the unifying king, were determined by place and by time. And one of the places on which the king's laws and the king's peace, as it was known, was carried out. And if you broke the king's peace, you were an enemy of the crown, and therefore an outlaw, were temporal for holidays, in person, so the king's staff, and also on the royal roads. So the first truly unifying force of the federation of these kingdoms were these royal roads, and they were enforced by keepers of the peace, or justices of the peace, who looked after His Majesty's roads, or magistrates. And so the very basic notion of law of the King of England came about through these 4 royal roads. Next slide, please.
Think about landing the plane. Daniel, please think about landing the plane.
I'm landing the plane now. You can see here that the east towards the top here, the 4 royal roads appear in this format. Next plane, please. Next slide, please. And while I'm researching this, thinking I'm all very excited to have discovered the final, the first earliest British road map, I discover in Matthew Paris's book, which must have about 40 first going for it in the British Library, a very similar looking diagram which depicts the same 4 roads, the royal roads where the king's peace is kept. So why would you use this image on a genealogical roll? And that is because the royal roads are the, if you like, the basic unit of law and the king's power. And so the 3 diagrams at the beginning show the extent of the king's laws by the roads. They show his place as fortune in terms of the wheel of fortune, and his place in terms of history, because it shows how he sits in with the other 7 kingdoms that he's unifying. And so in this rather magnificent genealogical roll, not only do we have the answers, where are we and what time is it, unified, much like an Aztec map would do, in an very, very early English medieval manuscript, but also the definition of power and who are we for the king and the royal family.
Wow.
It's wonderful.
It is just remarkable. Thank you very much, Daniel. And others may be feeling that now is the time for their break or to ask questions. So I was asked on bended knee not to drop the break if we were running a bit late, but it would be good if people could be asking their questions during this break. So there's going to be a 10-minute period where I think to start with, I need a 5-minute break. For the first 5 minutes, let's take any questions that are out there, please. But now's the time to be breaking if you're going to break.
Mike, Jacob Ford has raised his hand.
Okay, I've just seen it now. Yeah, you weren't at the beginning, so you won't have known how to phrase it. Could you just very quickly phrase your question, please, Jacob?
Sure. I was just wondering, Daniel, whose idea was it to draw those roads as a tube map? I asked because I redesigned the Tabula Peutingeriana as a New York City subway map, since I feel like they do the same thing in distorting space. I love that you guys had the same idea.
Sure. I wish I could credit it to someone else, but it was all me.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, we can tell.
Very cool. Thanks.
Any other questions? Strange enough, I seem to have caught you on the hop. A lot of people obviously wanted their comfort break. Oh, here's Lawrence Penny. Lawrence?
Thank you. Yeah. Lovely talk, Daniel. Thank you very much. You credited Matthew Paris in the road map, but I don't, unless I missed it. You didn't credit him in the heptarchy map, because there is a Matthew Paris heptarchy map at the beginning of his most famous genealogical roll as well. And I wonder if I don't know about the fortune map. Is there precedent for that in Paris as well?
Yeah, the fortune map is not really, it's not a map actually, it's a diagram.
Okay, yeah, I shouldn't have called it a map. Yeah.
But no, I didn't credit Matthew Paris because there are in fact maps of the heptarchy predating Paris. There are many maps of the heptarchy predating this map as well. However, in terms of road maps, I'd never spotted that road map. And I mean, obviously I know Paris's maps of the British Isles as well. I'd never spotted that road map lurking in the Additamentum, Additamentorum, I think it's called, and I'd never spotted it before, and I was very, very upset to find it. But in terms of mentioning him here, it was just because he's the only one with precedence of the roadmap.
Great, thank you, Lawrence.
Hey, Mike, I'm going to step away for a minute. I'll just leave it the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I need my 5 minutes too. But you can see that Daniel is still here, guys. So if you have a question, can Liliana or Katie access?
Yeah, I'll monitor. You guys go ahead. But we're coming back. We're starting at 7:20, correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so make sure everyone comes back at 7:20. We'll see everyone then, or you can stay and ask questions.
Indeed. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's fascinating. I don't see anyone raising hands, so why doesn't everyone just enjoy the break? And then if you do, I will keep watching and see if anyone raises a hand with a question.
One thing I didn't say that I could add at this point.
Go for it.
Is I'm surprised no one asked, because I missed it, is how do you date a roll to 1320? And the great thing about this being a genealogical roll is, of course, the people who appear on it. And the original master who drew it was taken over, presumably working in tandem with an assistant who depicts Edward II's youngest child, Joan of the Tower, who was born in 1321, which is great because it then goes on to show both Henry Plantagenet, who married Maud Chaworth, and Thomas of Lancaster. And it doesn't give a date of death for Thomas of Lancaster. And rather conveniently, he died on the 22nd of March, 1322. So we have a 9-month window in which we know it was made between Joan of the Tower, Henry II's daughter, birth, and Thomas of Lancaster's death on the 22nd of March, 1322.
That's brilliant that you can pin it down that closely.
Convenient of them.
Indeed. Jeremy, did you have a question?
Yes, having grown up quite close to the Icknield Way, it's a road which rambles without really going anywhere, and has never become a main road in the present day like Watling Street or Aikman Street have done. I wonder, has Daniel got any comments on the importance of the Icknield Way in those days?
Yeah, I like you, I live on the Icknield Way. And interestingly, the importance of those roads were that they, of course, roughly traverse the 7 kingdoms that were being unified. And that's why they were designated as the royal roads, because if you follow each one of those 4 roads from beginning to end, and you will pick up all 7 kingdoms. And they all roughly cross over near London.
Brilliant. And we've had a question in the chat from Ryan Moore asking about the makers. Do you have an idea if it's a single maker or a team or anything about that?
No, it's, yeah, indeed. So the main artist is known conveniently as the Chaworth Master, copies very much from the Queen Mary Psalter in the British Library, which is roughly the same period. And it's much, I mean, it's like the styles are so similar, you could almost imagine them sitting next to each other in the same workshop. And the Chaworth Master is responsible for the first 7 skins. There is then an assistant who appears to fill in the rather boring green lines that join the kings, who works through to about 1322 and then peters out. It's then picked up again by either 1 or 2, and I would say it's a coin toss between whether it's 1 or 2 other artists who pick up the extension to 1413. Much less skilled than the first master, who's really quite a good artist. If you look at that Wheel of Fortune, that's right up there with English vernacular art from 14th century. There are very few things finer. And if you notice, it's also a rather beautiful oriel window, which is obviously meant to emulate some cathedral.
Definitely. And then Ken Habib has a question as well.
Hi, Daniel. The question is, well, another question occurred to me is, one is that why did this map, this roll suddenly turn up? And the other question is, do you know?
You muted yourself, Ken.
Yeah, we've lost Ken, but I think he'll come back in a sec.
Oh,
sorry, Ken.
here I am.
There we go. Sorry, go.
Here I am. The question is, why did this roll turn up just now?
So it's been hiding in plain sight. It appeared for the first time in about 1898, and it was actually exhibited at the Society of Antiquaries. And then it's been in the same family, which is basically by descent from the Chaworth family, till 1988. And it was catalogued and described rather beautifully and sold to a well-known Scandinavian collector, and somewhat to my surprise, received an export license. Where it sat until 2005 when it was resold to a private collector here in London. So, and then they're now selling, and for whatever reason. But remarkable. I mean, it's a remarkable find. Although it's been known about for 100 years, because it's never been considered as a work of cartography before. And it was only actually a colleague of mine who pointed out to me, "Are these maps, Daniel? They've got directions on it."
And it may be a fun question. Do you happen to know what sorts of punishments were meted out to people who were transgressing on that road or any of those roads.
If you broke the king's peace, you were designated an outlaw, and outlaws were either expelled from the city in the protection of the crown, or if they had broken some other slightly more serious laws, were executed or sent away.
I seem to remember there was a distance rule, wasn't there? That if you were carrying a weapon within a certain number of feet either side, that counted.
That was enough to make you an outlaw.
Yeah.
Because there was obviously a big problem with highwaymen.
Yeah, so it was probably a bow shot thinking about it, wouldn't it be? Although, anyway.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope if those who needed a break got it. And I hope those who asked a question asked it. And we're going to now move on with the second part of our program. Thank you so much.